The cold seeped through my jacket, the kind of damp chill that promises snow is on its way. It was late, the sky was a bruised purple, and the only sounds were the crunch of gravel under my truck's tires and the lonely lapping of the lake against the shore. I killed the engine. For a second, I just sat there in the silence of my driveway, the smell of wet asphalt and pine needles filling the cab. It's a smell I usually love, but not that night. You know that feeling you get when something is wrong before you can even see it? A quiet alarm bell ringing in the back of your mind. I felt it the moment I stepped out of the truck. My eyes went straight to the porch, to the empty space beside the front door. It was gone. The flag wasn't there. Not just any flag. It was the memorial banner for my wife, Sarah, the one the honor guard folded into a perfect heavy triangle and placed in my hands at her funeral 2 years ago. She was a firefighter. She didn't come home from a 4-alarm warehouse fire. That flag. It was all I had left of her public self, the hero. At home, she was just Sarah. But that flag was how the world saw her, how I remembered her courage. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold, hard beat. I walked toward the house, my steps feeling heavy, like I was wading through water. And there, tacked to my front door, was a single pristine white sheet of paper. An official notice from the Homeowners Association. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. The notice was polite, deceptively so. It cited a bylaw I'd never heard of, something about preserving the natural scenic view of the lake for all residents. It mentioned a violation. It demanded immediate compliance. And then, at the bottom, it mentioned the flag had been removed and stored for safekeeping. They stole it. They called it safekeeping. And if you're a regular on Karenology, you already know. It's never ever just about a misunderstanding. I ripped the notice off the door. The paper felt flimsy, insulting. For 2 years, that flag had hung there. It was my quiet ritual. Every morning, I'd hang it up using the heavy-duty carabiner she used to carry on her gear. Every night, I'd take it down. It was a simple act of remembrance. It hurt no one. It blocked no one's precious view of the water unless they were standing 2 feet from my front door. Have you ever had something so personal, so sacred, trampled on for a reason so ridiculously petty? Let me know in the comments, because that night, I felt utterly alone in my anger. The next morning, I was at the Homeowners Association office before they'd even finished brewing their coffee. The office was in the community clubhouse, a sterile room that smelled of air freshener and quiet desperation. Behind a large mahogany desk sat Mr. Henderson, the board president. He was in his 60s with silver hair so perfect it looked like a helmet, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He was a retired developer, a man who saw our little lakeside community not as a collection of homes, but as lines on a balance sheet. "Ah, Jack," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I was expecting you." He gestured to a chair I didn't take. From a drawer he produced the flag, folded perfectly. He pushed it across the polished desk toward me. "I trust this resolves the matter." I looked at the flag, then back at him. "The matter is resolved when this is hanging back on my porch, where it belongs." Henderson's smile tightened just a fraction. He leaned back in his leather chair, a picture of calm authority. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. The board has passed a new covenant, a scenic view servitude. It's for the good of the community. It protects our property values." He picked a piece of lint off his expensive suit. "We can't have personal displays cluttering the aesthetic." "It's not a personal display," I said, my voice dangerously low. "It's a memorial for a fallen firefighter, my wife." He waved a dismissive hand. "A tragedy, of course. A great tragedy. But rules are rules. If you attempt to hang it again, the association will be forced to issue a fine, $5,000, and pursue legal action to enforce the covenant." He paused, letting the threat hang in the air. "It's for the community's financial health, you understand? We have to protect our liquidity." Liquidity. It was a strange word to use. It felt out of place, a piece of jargon from a boardroom, not a neighborhood meeting. I saw him idly caress a gold cufflink on his shirt, a small, unconscious gesture. It was a detail that meant nothing then. But trust me, it would come to mean everything. I took the flag. Its weight felt familiar and heavy in my arms. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out, his condescending smile burning a hole in my back. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd cowed me with his fines and his lawyers and his $5 words. He thought I'd just fold, just like he'd folded my wife's flag. I got home and walked straight to the porch. I took out Sarah's old carabiner, the metal cool and solid in my hand. I unfolded the flag, the stars and stripes a defiant slash of color in the gray afternoon. I looked across the street, toward Henderson's perfectly manicured lawn. He was watching from his window. I wanted him to see. I clipped the flag back in its place. The click of the carabiner latching shut was the loudest sound in the world. Rules, I thought, looking right at his window. Let's test yours. That defiant click of the carabiner echoed in the quiet street. For a moment, it felt good. It felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of my own space. But I've lived long enough to know that men like Henderson don't play for small victories. They play to win the whole board, and I had just become the most inconvenient pawn on it. It didn't take long for the other shoe to drop. It didn't come in the form of a lawsuit or another notice slapped on my door. No, Henderson was smarter than that. His attack was quieter, more insidious. It came through the soft glow of a phone screen. The neighborhood had one of those private online forums, a place for people to trade gardening tips, announce garage sales, and complain about teenagers. That night, it became Henderson's weapon. A post appeared from him. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. He never mentioned me by name. He didn't have to. He wrote about the importance of community cohesion and the shared sacrifice needed to secure a vital grant for the upcoming winter. A grant, he explained, that was essential for road maintenance and snow removal. He lamented that the grant committee valued aesthetic harmony and that any disruptions, however well-intentioned, could jeopardize the funding for everyone. He ended the post with a question that was pure poison. Are we a community that puts the collective good first? The pings on my phone started, one after another, like a slow drumbeat of condemnation. He's right. Some people are just so selfish. My taxes pay for those roads. No one mentioned the flag. No one mentioned Sarah. They were talking about snow. They were talking about money. Henderson had expertly reframed the entire conflict. I wasn't a grieving husband honoring his wife. I was the guy who was going to make them all shovel their own driveways in February. Have you ever been made the villain in a story you didn't even know you were in? It's a gut punch. The next day, the digital world spilled into the real one. My neighbor Jim, who I'd shared beers with for a decade, suddenly couldn't meet my eye as he got his mail. A woman I knew from the local book club pulled her kids a little closer as I walked past. The silence was louder than any argument. It was a suffocating, calculated isolation. They were turning my home into an island. A couple of days later, I was fueling up my truck at the gas station on the edge of town. The air smelled of gasoline and impending snow. "Mr. Reardon," a young voice called out. I turned. It was a kid, barely in his 20s, with a familiar earnestness in his eyes. He was wearing a volunteer firefighter jacket. "I'm David," he said, shifting his weight. "David Chen. I served with your wife, in the department. I was a rookie when she—" He trailed off, his face flushing. I managed a small smile. "I remember her talking about you, the kid who could eat a whole pizza by himself." He laughed, the tension breaking. "Yeah, that was me." He looked toward my truck, then back at me, his expression turning serious. "I saw the post on the community forum. It's wrong, what they're doing." He hesitated. "Sarah, she was a legend. That flag means something." "I appreciate that, David," I said, and I meant it. His was the first voice of support I'd heard in days. "It's not just that," he said, lowering his voice. "The whole thing is weird. Henderson and his board, they've been making a lot of strange decisions lately." He kicked at a loose piece of gravel. "Like, you know that old service road, the one that cuts behind the houses on the lakefront?" I nodded. It was a dirt track, barely used by anyone except the utility company. "Well," David continued, "the homeowners association blocked it off last month, put up a big metal gate. We got a memo about it at the firehouse. It means if there's a fire on the lakeside, especially at the far end, our engine has to go all the way around. Adds a good 7-8 minutes to our response time." He shook his head. "The chief is furious. Said he hopes nothing catches fire when the lake freezes over. Getting water from the hydrant on that side would be a nightmare now." He said it casually, just a firefighter complaining about logistics. But for me, it wasn't casual. The word Henderson had used in his office slammed back into my mind: liquidity. And his weird obsession with the scenic view. A blocked fire road, a 7-minute delay, a nightmare for firefighters. What would a 7-minute delay do to a house fire? And more importantly, what would it do to the value of the land it sat on once it was a pile of ash? I thanked David, my mind racing. I finished pumping the gas, my hands moving on autopilot. I didn't drive home. I drove toward the old service road. It was exactly as he'd described. A heavy, brand-new steel gate stretched across the entrance, secured with a thick chain and a formidable lock. A fresh, no trespassing sign, courtesy of the homeowners association, was bolted to it. I stood there, the cold wind whipping off the lake, and stared at that gate. It wasn't just a gate, it was a puzzle piece, and I had a sickening feeling that I knew exactly what kind of picture it was starting to make. That new steel gate felt like a declaration of war. It wasn't just a barrier across a dirt road, it was a line drawn in the sand. I spent the next couple of days digging, but not with a shovel. My days as a logistics specialist for disaster relief NGOs taught me one thing. Every system has a blueprint, and most of them are public record if you know where to look. My dining room table disappeared under a sea of paper. County planning maps, old zoning regulations, property deeds I'd downloaded from the county clerk's website. It was a tedious, mind-numbing process. My eyes burned from staring at fine print and faded survey lines. I was looking for a ghost, an official designation, a forgotten easement. Anything that proved that service road wasn't just some dirt track Henderson could close on a whim. For 2 days, I found nothing. Just dead ends and legal jargon that made my head spin. And all the while, the pressure from the neighborhood was getting worse. The online forum was a constant buzz of thinly veiled accusations. Someone posted a picture of my flag, still flying, with the caption, "Some people just don't care about the rest of us." The post got over 50 likes. 50. In a community of less than 200 homes. If you're enjoying this story, and I hope you are, maybe hit that like button for me, because back then, I sure wasn't getting any. Henderson's next move was as predictable as it was infuriating. A certified letter arrived. It was a notice of unscheduled safety inspection. My porch, the letter claimed, had been reported for potential structural instability and required immediate assessment by a county-approved inspector. My porch, the one I'd rebuilt myself 5 years ago with reinforced steel joists, the one that could probably support my truck. It was a joke, a bad, transparent joke. The inspector showed up the next day. He was a weedy man with a clipboard and an apologetic expression that looked permanently fixed to his face. He spent less than 5 minutes tapping at the support beams with a hammer before he started unspooling a roll of bright yellow caution tape. "Sorry," he mumbled, not looking me in the eye. "Board's orders, unsafe for public access until it's brought up to code." He wrapped the tape around the posts, a bright, ugly scar across the front of my house. He even wrapped it around the flagpole. Now, I literally couldn't get to the flag. It was a petty, brilliant move. He'd made it physically impossible for me to follow my daily ritual of honor. That evening, Henderson called an emergency community meeting. Not in the clubhouse, but right out on the street, in front of my house. He wanted a public spectacle, and he got one. People gathered on the sidewalk, their arms crossed, their faces a mixture of curiosity and resentment. Henderson stood like a Roman senator addressing the plebs. "As you can see," he began, gesturing dramatically at the yellow tape, "we are dealing with a serious safety issue, but this is just a symptom of a larger problem, a problem of one individual putting their own desires above the well-being and financial security of our entire community." He had them eating out of his hand. I could feel their eyes on me, 100 tiny pinpricks of judgment. I expected it. What I didn't expect was for Mark to step forward. Mark lived 2 doors down. We'd coached our kids' Little League team together. He'd been at my house for a barbecue just a month ago. He had told me, in private, that what Henderson was doing was a disgrace. He cleared his throat. "Jack," he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "We're your neighbors. We respect Sarah's memory. We do, but this has gone too far." He pointed a trembling finger at my house. This stubbornness, it's going to cost us all. The grant, the property values. Is one flag really worth all that? Maybe it's time to just let it go, for the good of the rest of us. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought was a friend? That one hurt more than all the online comments and dirty looks combined. It was a public shiv, slid right between my ribs. The crowd murmured in agreement. I stood there on my unsafe porch, behind a wall of yellow tape, completely and utterly alone. In their eyes, I was the problem, the unreasonable man holding their prosperity hostage. The fight went out of me. For the first time, I looked at that flag, a prisoner of bureaucratic tape, and thought, maybe he's right. Maybe it's time to give up. I didn't answer him. I just turned around and went back inside, the sound of their whispers following me, like a swarm of angry bees. The silence in my house was absolute. I sank into a chair at the dining table, the mess of maps and documents mocking me. It was all for nothing. I had fought and I had lost. The weight of it all, the grief, the anger, the sudden crushing loneliness pressed down on me. I rested my head in my hands. The fight was over. That night was one of the longest of my life. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face, his finger pointing at me, the murmur of the crowd backing him up. It felt like a physical weight on my chest. Defeat is a bitter pill to swallow, and I was choking on it. I got up and walked back to the dining room table, the graveyard of my failed efforts. The yellow tape on my porch was visible through the window, a glowing, mocking grin in the moonlight. I stared at the pile of papers, ready to sweep them all into a trash bag, but my eyes landed on the words David, the young firefighter, had said. 7-8 minutes to our response time. It wasn't just about a flag anymore. It was never just about a flag. It was about a blocked fire road. It was about Henderson's weird obsession with liquidity. There was a logic to it, a cold, predatory logic that I just couldn't see yet. I pushed the county maps aside and pulled up a different set of documents on my laptop, old land development proposals from the last 20 years. It was another long shot, another needle in a digital haystack. I scrolled through endless pages of corporate speak and architectural drawings, and then I found it. It wasn't a map or a deed. It was a footnote in an appendix of a failed development plan from 15 years ago, a proposal from a company called Lakeside Pinnacle LLC to build luxury condos on the exact stretch of land where our houses now stood. The plan was rejected by the county, but the interesting part was the name of the managing partner listed for the LLC, a younger but unmistakable Mr. Henderson. My heart started beating a little faster. I cross-referenced the LLC with current business filings. Lakeside Pinnacle LLC was still active, though dormant for years. And then I hit the jackpot. The filing had been updated just 3 months ago. A new partner had been added, a company named Viridian Development Group. A quick search on Viridian turned up their specialty, acquiring distressed properties in scenic locations, clearing the land, and flipping it for a massive profit. Their entire business model was built on buying low and selling high. And what's the quickest way to turn a prime lakeside property into a distressed asset? What would make a homeowner desperate to sell, even at a loss? A fire, maybe. Or the sudden crippling loss of homeowners' insurance because the fire department could no longer guarantee a timely response. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The blocked fire road wasn't a random act of bureaucratic spite. It was a strategic move. The scenic view servitude wasn't about aesthetics. It was a tool to control the residents, to wear them down, to make life difficult. Henderson wasn't just trying to bully me over a flag. He was trying to tank the value of our entire neighborhood, so his partners at Viridian could swoop in and buy our homes for pennies on the dollar. He was playing the long game, and my flag just happened to be the perfect pawn to create a public distraction. That strange word he'd used, liquidity. It wasn't about the homeowners association's finances. It was about the ease with which our properties could be bought and sold, liquidated. He wasn't just a power-hungry board president. He was a predator, getting ready to carve up our community for parts. And he was using Sarah's memory as a smokescreen. The anger returned, but this time, it wasn't the hot, reckless rage I'd felt before. It was cold. It was focused. It was the kind of anger that clarifies things. I finally had the why, but what I didn't have was proof, not real proof. A 15-year-old business filing and a blocked road were just dots on a map. I needed a line connecting them. I needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be dismissed as a conspiracy theory. from the crazy guy with the flag. My eyes fell on a document I'd printed out earlier and dismissed as irrelevant. It was the original master plan for our development, from back when the roads were first laid out. I'd been looking at the property lines, but this time I looked at the utilities. I traced the faint blue line that marked the main water pipe. I saw the primary fire hydrant it fed, the one on our side of the lake. Then I saw another, smaller line branching off it, leading straight to the block service road. It was marked with a symbol I didn't recognize, not a hydrant, something else. I pulled out my phone and searched for old municipal water system schematics. It took another hour of digging through archaic city engineering sites, and then I found the symbol. It wasn't just a pipe, it was a dedicated high-pressure emergency intake, a direct, unfiltered line to the lake, designed to be used by fire trucks as a last resort if the main hydrants failed or froze in the winter. Blocking access to that road didn't just add 7 minutes to the response time. It completely cut off the fire department's backup water supply for our entire end of the lake. This wasn't just negligence. This wasn't just a dirty business deal. This was a man-made disaster waiting to happen. Henderson hadn't just put our property values at risk. He'd put our lives at risk. And I had just found the evidence. It wasn't in a secret file or a whispered confession. It was right there, in a public document, hidden in plain sight. The first hint of dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. I looked out the window at my flag, still held captive by the yellow tape. I finally had a plan. It was risky. It was audacious. And it had nothing to do with bylaws or fines. I was done playing Henderson's game. It was time to play my own. I picked up my phone, but I didn't call a lawyer. I called the one person who I knew would understand what was truly at stake. I called the fire chief. The call to Fire Chief Miller was short and to the point. I didn't give him the whole story, just the critical facts. The original master plan, the emergency water intake, and the new gate blocking access. He was a man of few words, a 30-year veteran who'd seen it all. I could hear the gears turning on the other end of the line. "I'll look into it," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. That was all I needed. My next step was to go on the offensive. Henderson thought he had me cornered, isolated. He thought the fight was about a flag and a stubborn old man. It was time to change the battlefield. I spent the morning drafting an email. It wasn't angry or emotional. It was cold, factual, and addressed to every single resident in the homeowners association. The subject line was simple: urgent, community safety, and insurance liability. In the email, I laid it all out. I attached the plat map showing the emergency water intake. I attached a screenshot of the fire code regulation about maintaining clear access for emergency vehicles. I explained in simple, clear terms what the block service road meant, not just a delay, but a potential catastrophic failure of our firefighting resources. And then I delivered the knockout punch. I explained what that failure would mean for their homeowners' insurance. You see, insurance companies base their rates on risk, and a neighborhood that has just voluntarily cut off its own emergency water supply, that's a 5-alarm fire in an actuary's spreadsheet. I suggested very politely that each resident might want to call their own insurance agent and ask a simple question. Am I still covered if the fire department's access to the emergency water intake is blocked? I hit send, and then I waited. It took about an hour. The first reply was from a nervous-sounding accountant who lived down the street, then another, and another. The quiet, judgmental whispers on the community forum turned into a panicked roar. People weren't talking about my flag anymore. They were talking about non-renewal notices. They were talking about premiums skyrocketing. They were talking about being financially ruined if a stray ember landed on their roof. Have you ever seen fear flip a switch in a group of people? It's a terrifying and powerful thing to watch. I hadn't attacked Henderson's character. I'd attacked his neighbors' wallets, and it was working. The climax came that afternoon. An official-looking car I didn't recognize pulled up in front of my house. A man in a sharp suit got out. He wasn't from the neighborhood. He introduced himself as the lawyer for Viridian Development Group, Henderson's silent partners. He didn't want to talk on my taped-off porch. He wanted to talk in his car. "Mr. Reardon," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "It seems there has been a misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication." He offered me a deal. Viridian would advise Mr. Henderson to drop all the fines. They would pay to have my porch recertified. They would even make a generous donation to the firefighters' charity of my choice. In return, all I had to do was send a follow-up email to the residents, clarifying that the whole thing was a simple bureaucratic mix-up, and the safety issue had been resolved. He was offering me an exit, a clean, profitable win. All my problems would disappear. The fines, the isolation, the public pressure, all gone. All it would cost was my silence. It was the ethical fork in the road, the easy way out versus the right way. For a second, I was tempted. I was tired of fighting, tired of being the bad guy. But then I looked past him, at my house. I saw the flag, still wrapped in that ugly yellow tape. I thought of Sarah, running into a burning building, while men like this one sat in climate-controlled cars, cutting deals. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice quiet. "You want me to lie to my neighbors? You want me to tell them they're safe when you and I both know Henderson has gambled with their lives for a real estate deal?" The lawyer's smile didn't falter. "I'm offering you a solution, Jack, a way for everyone to walk away happy." "I'm not walking away," I said. I opened the car door. "And you can tell Henderson his little game is over." I got out of the car and didn't look back. I had just declared war on a multi-million-dollar development company. The lawyer's offer wasn't a truce. It was a confirmation. They were scared. My email had worked better than I could have ever imagined. They were trying to buy my silence because they knew I was right. But in refusing their deal, I had also crossed a line. I was no longer just a nuisance. I was a direct threat to their entire operation. The yellow tape on my porch suddenly felt less like an insult and more like a target. I knew with absolute certainty that their next move wouldn't be a notice or a lawsuit. It would be something far more direct. The lawyer drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and the heavy silence of an ultimatum delivered. I knew I had poked the hornet's nest. The quiet war of bylaws and social pressure was over. This was going to get ugly. I spent the rest of the day on edge, watching every car that passed my house, flinching at every unexpected sound. The feeling of being watched was no longer a paranoid fantasy. It was a certainty. The next move came after dark. It was subtle, almost deniable. I was in my garage trying to distract myself by organizing Sarah's old tools when the lights flickered and died. A power outage. Not just my house. The whole street was plunged into blackness. I grabbed a heavy flashlight and went outside. The air was still and cold. Across the lake, the lights of the other neighborhoods twinkled, untouched. This wasn't a grid failure. This was targeted. I walked to the utility pole at the end of my driveway. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw it. The door to the main breaker box was ajar, and on the ground below it, half hidden in the wet leaves, was a single expensive-looking gold cufflink. It was identical to the one I'd seen Henderson nervously twisting in his office. My blood ran cold. He'd been here, or he'd sent someone. This was a message. I can reach you, I can turn your lights off, I can do whatever I want. That was the moment my fear finally curdled into pure, crystalline rage. This man had threatened my home, slandered my wife's memory, endangered my neighbors, and was now skulking around my property in the dark. The line had been crossed. I went back inside, my mind working furiously. I couldn't fight him with threats or fists. I had to fight him with his own weapons, rules, appearances, and public perception. He had built his power on the illusion of control and respectability. I needed to shatter that illusion, and I needed to do it in a way no one could ignore. An idea began to form, a wild, audacious plan born of desperation and anger. Henderson was planning to hold the annual Homeowners Association budget meeting in 2 days at the local high school gymnasium. It was his yearly coronation, the moment he would unveil his grand plans and solidify his power for another year. He was planning to propose a massive special assessment for lakeside erosion control, the cover for his development scheme. That meeting was going to be my stage. I spent the next 48 hours preparing. I didn't sleep. I lived on coffee and adrenaline. I called in a favor from a buddy in the county surveyor's office, getting a high-resolution, certified copy of the original development plat map. I used my own printer to blow it up to the size of a movie poster. I used a red marker to highlight the blocked service road and the emergency water intake, making it impossible to miss. I also made another call. This one was to Chief Miller. I laid out the entire plan. He was silent for a long time on the other end of the line. I thought he was going to tell me I was crazy. "It's a civilian matter, Jack," he finally said. "I can't officially get involved in a homeowners association dispute." There was a pause. "But," he added, the word hanging in the air, "if a concerned citizen were to ask me a direct question about fire safety protocols in a public forum, I'd be obligated to answer it, honestly." That was all I needed. The trap was set. The night of the meeting, the gym was packed. The whole community was there, buzzing with anxiety over my email and Henderson's promised erosion control project. The air was thick with the smell of floor wax and nervous sweat. I saw Mark, my former friend, avoiding my gaze. I didn't care. My focus was on Henderson, standing at a podium on the stage, basking in the spotlight like a king on his throne. I waited in the back, leaning against the cold brick wall, the rolled-up map feeling like a weapon in my hand. Henderson started his presentation, his voice oozing confidence. He spoke of rising water levels, of the duty to protect their investments, of a bright, secure future. He clicked through a slideshow of idyllic lake photos and alarming-looking erosion charts. He was selling them a dream, and they were buying it. He announced the special assessment, an extra $10,000 per household. A collective gasp went through the crowd. That was my cue. I started walking down the center aisle toward the stage. A low murmur rippled through the gym as people turned to watch me. Henderson stopped mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as he saw me approaching. Two of his bored cronies moved to intercept me. "This is a private meeting, Jack," Henderson said into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescension. "If you have a complaint, you can submit it in writing." I didn't stop. I kept walking until I was standing right at the foot of the stage. I looked out at the faces of my neighbors, confused, angry, scared. Then I looked up at Henderson. "I don't have a complaint," I said, my voice ringing out in the sudden silence of the gym. "I have a question, and I think everyone here deserves to hear the answer." I held up the rolled-up map. The show was about to begin. The silence in the gymnasium was absolute. Every eye was on me. Henderson's face was a mask of controlled fury. "This is not the time or the place, Jack," he hissed into the microphone. "Security, please escort this man out." Two large men in blazers started toward me, but they were too late. I unfurled the giant map with a dramatic snap that echoed through the cavernous room. I held it up for everyone to see. The bright red lines I had drawn were impossible to ignore. "This," I announced, my voice steady and loud, "is the official plat map for our community. And this red line here is the fire department's emergency service road. And this circle," I tapped the symbol with my finger, "is the backup water intake for fighting fires on our side of the lake. The one you, Mr. Henderson, illegally blocked with a gate 2 months ago." A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Henderson's face went pale. "That's a ridiculous accusation. That's an unused maintenance track. It has nothing to do with fire safety." "Is that so?" I replied, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Because I have a feeling the fire chief might disagree." I hit the call button and put the phone on speaker. A moment of static, and then Chief Miller's gruff voice filled the gym. "Miller speaking." "Chief," I said clearly. "This is Jack Reardon. I'm here at the community budget meeting. I have a public safety question for you. Could you please explain to the residents of the Lakeside Homeowners Association what the consequences would be if access to the emergency water intake on the North Service Road were to be deliberately obstructed?" The crowd held its breath. The chief didn't hesitate. "The consequences," his voice boomed from my phone, "the consequences are that our response is compromised. Our ability to fight a major structure fire in your area is severely diminished. In fact," he continued, and I could hear the cold anger in his voice, "I sent a formal notice to the major insurance underwriters for this county just this morning. I informed them that, due to a critical infrastructure failure caused by an obstruction I was made aware of, I could no longer certify your community as meeting minimum fire safety standards." He paused for effect. The silence in the gym was so profound I could hear the hum of the overhead lights. "Effective immediately," Chief Miller's voice concluded. "Your fire risk rating has been downgraded. As for what that means for your individual homeowners' policies, you'll have to ask your insurance companies. But I wouldn't expect good news." He hung up. The sound of the disconnected call was like a gunshot. And then, chaos. Utter, complete pandemonium. People were shouting, jumping to their feet, pulling out their phones. The $10,000 assessment was forgotten. Their dream homes had just become uninsurable, worthless. The illusion of safety and prosperity that Henderson had so carefully constructed had just been blown to smithereens. Henderson stood at the podium, frozen, his mouth opening and closing, with no sound coming out. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. He knew he was finished. All his schemes, all his plans, all his lies, exposed in a 2-minute phone call. His liquidity had evaporated. In the ensuing uproar, the meeting fell apart. Henderson was surrounded by a mob of furious homeowners. I saw Mark, my treacherous neighbor, yelling louder than anyone. I just rolled up my map and walked out of the gym, leaving them to their fury. I had won. But it didn't feel like the clean victory I had imagined. The next week, the Homeowners Association board was dissolved. Henderson and his cronies resigned in disgrace. The Viridian development deal collapsed. The gate on the service road was torn down. The yellow tape disappeared from my porch. The fines were dropped. I had won on every front. But victory came with a price. A few days later, a package arrived. Inside was my wife's flag, freshly dry cleaned and folded with military precision. There was no note. I knew it was from the new interim board. A peace offering. I took the flag out to my porch, but I hesitated. The simple act of hanging it up no longer felt the same. It had been a quiet, personal ritual. Now, it felt like a public monument to a bitter war. The whole town knew the story. The memory of Sarah had been dragged through the mud, used as a weapon by both sides. It wasn't just mine anymore. I stood there for a long time, the weight of the flag in my hands. Then I folded it back into its perfect triangle. I walked to my truck and drove to the volunteer fire station where Sarah had spent so many years of her life. I found David, the young firefighter who had inadvertently given me the key to the whole puzzle. "This belongs here," I said, handing him the flag, with her other family. He took it with a reverence that brought a lump to my throat. They hung it in a glass case in the main hall, right next to a plaque bearing Sarah's name. It was where it was meant to be, not on my porch as a symbol of a private battle, but here as a symbol of public service and sacrifice for everyone to see and remember. I drive past the fire station sometimes. I see the flag through the window, illuminated by the warm light inside. I lost my quiet ritual. I lost that private piece of her that I held onto every morning. But in its place, the whole town gained a reminder of what a hero looks like. And maybe, just maybe, that was a victory of a different kind. It wasn't the one I set out to win, but it was the one that mattered. And if you've ever had to give up something you love for a greater good, you'll know what I mean. Thanks for listening.